Now, I'm going to tell the story of Ahab and Jezebel, and maybe we can cut it, because I love to tell it, and it is full of good things for teaching children. Now, this is what I want you to watch for ahead of time, because I'm not going to stop and go and repeat it like I would if I was teaching the class and ask you questions. But what I want you to notice is the first sin that's committed. And then watch the second one, because both of them are childish sins. Every kid covets, every kid loses his temper, and the third one is even more childish. Every kid pouts. Now watch what those three childish sins finally lead to, and the end result, which is rather gory. But after all, television's full of violence, and sin is violent. And I said it last night, I'm going to say it again. God forgives sin, but we suffer the consequences just the same. The fellow who's an alcoholic and destroys his stomach may repent, may leave the alcohol alone, but that doesn't repair his stomach. And so we suffer for the sins that are committed, and that ought to be a great deterrent. You know, there's a lot going around now about saying, well, forgive you, ask him to forgive you, and he'll forgive you. Well, he will, that's right, but you're going to suffer the consequences of the sin just the same. The king is out in his garden, walking up and down, and he has a beautiful garden. It's one of the most beautiful spots in the land. And as he walks up and down, he looks over on one side, and there's a luscious grape vineyard. Oh, the grapes are purple and juicy, and the vines are just dropping over. They're so heavy, and the leaves are beautiful green. And the king thinks, I'd love to extend my garden and include that grape vineyard. And why not? I'll just go buy it from the man who owns it. And so off he goes to the house of Naboth, knocks on the door. Naboth comes to the door and is in a state of shock, because there's the king. Well, he invites the king in, and the king comes in and sits down and says, Naboth, I'd like to make a business deal with you. You've got a vineyard out here on the edge of my garden. It's in good shape, great shape. I'd like to buy it. Pay you a good price. In fact, I'll even give you more than it's worth. Naboth says, yes, I know the vineyard you're speaking of, and it is a good vineyard. Ahab, I'd like to give it to you. I'd be happy for the king to have it. I wouldn't think of charging you anything, but there is one small problem. And Ahab said, well, what's the problem? Well, Naboth said, if you'll remember, many, many years ago, when our people moved into the land of Canaan, God gave each tribe a certain amount of land, and he said that this land must stay within the tribe. And you must never sell it, give it away, or let it get out of the family. And I'm sorry, but it just so happens that that particular vineyard is a part of that original land, and I can't give it away or sell it. But I'm sure you understand that it's because God told us not to. Don't you, Ahab? And Ahab got red right up to his chin. And Naboth knew he was in trouble. And Ahab said, I don't think you understood me, Naboth. I said I'd pay you for the vineyard. I'll give you more than it's worth. I want that vineyard. Now, Naboth has butterflies in his stomach, and his knees are playing Home Sweet Home in a minor key, because he suddenly realizes that Ahab doesn't care what God said. What's he going to do? Is he going to disobey God and risk his wrath? Or is he going to refuse to sell it to the king and risk the wrath of the king? Well, Naboth chooses in favor of God, and he says, Ahab, I'm really sorry. I would like to just give you that vineyard. I can't. And I hope you'll understand that I can't go against God and God's wishes. And Ahab gets red all the way up to the top of his forehead, and he storms out the door, slams it behind him, stomps home to the palace, slams the door as he walks inside, prances upstairs into his bedroom, slams that door shut, throws himself across the bed, turns his face to the wall, and out goes his lower lip. And he stays there. Well, it's supper time. And Jezebel says, Ahab, supper's ready. He just lays there in the bed with his lower lip out. So she comes upstairs, tippy-toe, and she knocks on the door and says, Ahab, Ahab, supper's ready? Aren't you coming? The lower lip stays out. And he doesn't say anything. A little bit, Jezebel opens the door and she slips inside. She sits down on the edge of the bed and pats him on the back and she says, Ahab, what's the matter, sweetie? Come on now, tell Jezebel what's bothering you. No, Ahab. His lower lip stays out. Finally, she says, Sweetie, Jezebel can make it okay if you just tell me what it is. No, Ahab made one of the biggest mistakes that a man ever makes. He turned it over to the woman. And he said, Naboth won't give me his vineyard. And Jezebel said, Naboth won't give you his vineyard? Ahab said, No, and I even offered to buy it. And Jezebel said, Ahab, who are you? And Ahab thought about that a minute. Pretty soon he said, I'm the king. Well, she said, that's right. And if the king wants Naboth's vineyard, then the king should have Naboth's vineyard. Now, sweetie, you come on down to supper because Jezebel's going to take care of everything. Don't you worry about it. And that's what Jezebel did. She got a couple fellas to lie about Naboth and accused him of blaspheming. And back in those days, if you blasphemed God, they took you out on the edge of town and threw rocks at you till you were dead. Wonder how many folks there'd be walking around Indianapolis today if blasphemy was treated that way. Well, at any rate, they lied about Naboth, and they took him out, and they stoned him to death without asking any questions. No, the neighbor didn't say, well, I never heard him say anything bad before. Nobody came to his defense and said, oh, he's dealt wisely and honestly with me in a business sense. I thought he really loved God. Nobody came to his defense, took him outside of town, threw rocks at him till he was dead. And the dogs came along and licked up his blood. Now, they aren't pet dogs like we have today. They were raunchy dogs that were wild and hungry and ate most anything they could get a hold of. And so it's all over. And Jezebel has taken care of it. And Ahab has his vineyard, and everybody lives happily ever after. Until one day, a funny-looking fella in a camel's hair coat that was tanned from the desert marched in and stood with his legs apart in front of the throne, and he said, Ahab, you think you got away with stealing Naboth's vineyard, but I'm here to tell you that the same dogs that licked up Naboth's blood are going to lick up yours. And old Jezebel, who is sitting there trying to look beautiful and thinking that this has nothing to do with her, is amazed because Elijah wheels around and says, and Jezebel, you wicked woman, you think you got away with something? Those same dogs that are going to lick up your husband's blood when they get through with you, there won't be anything left at the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, and your skull, picked clean, and whew, he wheeled around and out he went. Gone. Now, the last time he came, he said it wouldn't rain, and it didn't. And I just imagined that probably Jezebel and Ahab both could have stood a tranquilizer or two when Elijah got through with that pronouncement. And time went on. Well, it doesn't all happen even in Elijah's lifetime. But Ahab, who is a chicken, we already know that because he pouts. You know, he's a baby. Well, he goes to battle one day, and he's afraid to go in dressed as the king, so he puts on a regular outfit like anybody else would wear, and he gets another fellow to put on the king's outfit, another dummy who wasn't using his head, the king of Judah put on Ahab's outfit, but the enemy was smart enough to know that wasn't Ahab. And so they march into battle. Now, Ahab's got armor on that covers the front of him, and covers the back of him, and covers his helmet, everything's, except here on the sides where it pulls together, that's open. Now, you're riding in a chariot, and that's exposed, right? Well, somebody just sticks an arrow in his sling at random and in his bow and pulls it and just the right spot. And old Ahab slumps over in his chariot and begins to bleed like a stuck pig all over everything, and they rush him home, but he's dead when they get there. They have his funeral, and one day somebody says, look at that chariot. Yuck! We need to wash it. It's covered with blood. So they took it down to the pools to wash it, and the same dogs who had licked up Naboth's blood came and licked up the blood of Ahab as it was washed off the chariot. Now, a good many years went by, and one son was king, and he dies. He fell through the lattice. The garden. The garden was everybody's problem, apparently, in Ahab's day. And another son is on the throne, and he's no better than his dad or his mother. And Jezebel is still ruling over everything. Can't you just imagine this old woman still wearing eye makeup and the hair done up on her head and all the jewelry and trying to look beautiful? Well, anyhow, God decides that it's time to take retribution on the whole crew. So he sends Elisha, because Elijah's gone on home in the fiery chariot, sends Elisha and tells him to send a prophet to anoint a new king. Now, I like this. There's no doubt in my mind that God not only is a very wise God, but a God with a sense of humor. Ahab has been violent. Jezebel has been disgustingly violent. And God anoints a man who's even more violent than both of them. And so it's the hot rod chariot driver of the day. Now, that's what Jehu was. He was the fastest chariot driver. He was a soldier, and when you realize what he gets through doing, you know that he was tough. And I mean tough the way we used to talk about it back when I was a kid, not tough the way we talk about it now. And so then the prophet anoints Jehu as the new king, and Jehu comes out and tells his buddies, hey, guess what? I'm going to be king. And, oh, you're kidding. Sure enough. And they have a big party, and Jehu says, hey, look. What's the sense in waiting around for the fellow who's on the throne now to die? Let's help him along. What do you say? And so they all think that's a great idea. And they all get together and off they head to the palace. Well, it's a long story, and I must make it short. The king comes out to meet him finally after every time he sends a servant out, the servant doesn't come back. He gets in the back of the line. He comes up and says, are you coming as a friend or foe? And Jehu says, shut up and get in the back of the line. Well, after about the third one's gone by, why, the king goes out himself. And when he gets there, Jehu looks at him and he said, am I your friend? As long as that wicked, no-good mother of yours is on the throne, I'm not your friend. And whew, he shoots him. And then he kills the other king of Judah who was visiting as well, gets rid of both of them, throws them over in the field of Naboth where the dogs eat them up. I sort of like that twist. At any rate, he comes barreling into town in his chariot now, and Jezebel knows he's coming. And so she's gotten dolled up the very best she possibly can. She's going to see if she can't tempt Jehu, this young kid, this poor old lady, sick. Well, Jehu comes into town. They know it's Jehu. They can tell by the chariot. Here he comes. And he comes screeching to a halt right underneath the window. And there's Jezebel up there in the window. And there are two fellows standing behind her. And she doesn't really get to say anything. Maybe sashay a little bit, but that's all. And Jehu looks up at those fellows and he says, hey, whose side are you guys on? They never said a word. They just picked her up and plop, splat, she hit the cobblestone street. And Jehu says, giddy up, and crunch. He ran the chariot wheels right over her body. Well, he jumped out of the chariot, went inside, and they had a banquet. Now, that's kind of disgusting, but that's what they did. And in the middle of the banquet, when everybody is good and drunk, Jehu gets up and he says, hold it! Hold it! Now, you know, there's a good lesson in drinking in this because it works on your tongue, and your tongue gets thick and you can't talk too good. And then the next thing it does is works on your eyes, and they don't focus like they're supposed to. And the next thing it does is work on your balance system, and you not only can't talk, you can't walk, you can't see. And the fourth thing it does, which is even worse than all of the others, is it works on your brain, you can't think straight. Well, Jehu's drunk, so is everybody else, and I'd get drunk, I think, too, maybe, if I had just gone crunch over somebody's body. But anyhow, he says, hey, fellas, hold it. Everybody stopped. He says, we've done a bad thing. One? What have we done, Jehu? Well, he says, we left the queen laying out there in the middle of the street. Now, that's no way to treat the queen. So he says, hey, you fellas over there, you go get a box and go out there in the street and get the queen, we'll bury her. Okay? Good. Go. Well, they went out to get the queen. Now, they're not in too good shape as far as seeing and walking is concerned, but it doesn't take them long to know that there's the blood stain right there on the cobblestone all over the place. That's where it happened. There's the screech marks from the wheels when Jehu pulled to a screeching halt. But, she's gone. So the search is on. And she's got to be there somewhere. And they look up and down the road, and they look in the gully, and they look in the ditch, and they're just about to give up and go back and say somebody else is taking care of the queen, when one of them says, "Hold it. Just a minute." And he's got a thumb with the palm of a hand. Well, where there is one palm, there should be another, right? So everyone busily searched, and pretty soon they found the other one. And after a while, they found the soles of her feet. And finally, they found her skull picked clean. That's all that was left of Jezebel. Now, it's a terrible story. And it ends horribly. And it all starts out with wanting something that doesn't belong to you. And every youngster knows what that means. So, that's sin. That's violence. That's noise. That's suspense. A lot of other things that we'll talk about as we go on.